innovation of Islamic finance, that is the innovation that Islamic finance brings in the finance community and the finance theory. And it is not meant to talk about financial engineering in Islamic finance. So it is not the new products or new contracts that are to be used in Islamic finance. Rather, it is the innovation that is brought by the whole concept of Islamic finance into the finance sector, both in theory and in practice. So this is the title, just to understand it well. It is innovation of Islamic finance, not in Islamic finance. So that is what we bring in other words. What does Islamic finance bring in, and what is new that we are getting? Why are we calling on humanity, on people, on everybody, everywhere to adopt Islamic finance, and what difference it is making in the finance ideas, both in theory and in practice. So this is my subject today. And this idea, the whole thing, this innovation became more under kind of focus after the 2008 crisis, when it was observed by many researchers that Islamic banks were or proved they are more resilient than other conventional financial institutions to the crisis. And looking at why did they not fall as quick or as hard as other institutions fell, we look at this idea, what it is then, what is the difference, what do they have to bring in. So that, in my opinion, this innovation that Islamic finance and Islamic banking brings in is very simple, and it's almost, it doesn't require any PhD in economics or in finance to understand it. And it is also very innocent, as if we didn't do anything. But in fact, it is also far-reaching and very important. What we've done in Islamic finance is to tell everybody, well, you guys were not in the right direction. The contracts that you know in financing that exist in the commercial laws that have been in practice all over the world for centuries, for all life in the past, in all societies, these contracts should be the core of Islam, or of finance. That is, financial institutions, instead of working on the basis of loan contract, they should work on the basis of other finance contracts that are known to everybody. Contracts that exist in commercial laws, and take them and make them the core, the heart of finance. This is the innovation, in fact. It is very simple, but it is important. And definitely, when we look at it, we notice that the immediate implication of this...
Dr. Kaf?
Yes.
Can we stop for a few...
Okay.
The Sorbonne is disconnected. The Sorbonne is disconnected.
Okay. Well, is it from here then? From here or from them?
From them.
Yeah.
وليد على عمرو؟ لا هو من
The Sorbonne is disconnected.
من فرنسا.
فرنسا من فرنسا. عندهم الشتاء.
عبارة فرنسية.
Maybe their system didn't like our innovation.
احنا 5 سنوات احنا قادرين نتحمل.
الدكتور قحط يقول لك this did not like our lecture.
Okay, no innovation. Recording, right?
Yeah. Yes.
سجل كل كلام.
Sophie, are with us?
We can't see anything.
Yeah, this is the request come from you audio only, from your side.
Okay. You do have audio only.
Yeah.
Yeah, so do we. We only have the audio. We have no image, nothing.
Yeah, because the request comes from your side as audio only. Can you request it again?
Okay.
Okay.
خلاص كان في صوت. بس disconnected. بس. عم
المشكلة مو من عندنا.
Professor Bayer.
Okay, are you guys with us now or not yet?
No, not yet.
But they are on audio. Are they still on audio with us?
No.
Or neither?
They have a problem with their add audio only. Sophie,
Yes,
you're
I'm still.
audio only.
Yeah, I still can't see anything.
Yeah, if you allow us to continue audio until the problem is fixed.
Okay, but yes,
Yeah.
continue.
Unfortunately, we do have your slides.
So
When we
when
will send
we
you the slides.
okay.
Oh, you have the slides? Very good, very good, yes.
Okay, should we continue now? Okay. So when we say that the innovation that is brought by Islamic finance into the finance system is to bring the contracts that are known in laws and in practice in all societies and make them the core of finance. That means immediately that finance should be channeled through sale contracts, lease contracts, and sharing contracts, rather than through lending contracts. So this is the immediate meaning of this innovation, and this is in fact what has been in practice also by Islamic banking essentially. Now these three channels of finance translate, in fact, when we look at them closely, into 4 axiomatic principles. Principle number 1, that is, earning can only be by owning. And 2, financial assets are mere representations. Sometimes I call them just veil. We look at what is behind them. And sometimes, as we will elaborate a little bit on this, I look at them as in the concept that is brought by Islamic finance. We do not recognize financial assets because we only look at them as representation of the real asset. The third axiomatic principle is the principle of realism. We will come to that. And the moral commitment. So we'll come to these principles and look at them if we take a little bit more on them. Earning by owning means that in finance, in order to earn, you've got to start from a point of owning an asset. If you don't own an asset, you are not entitled to any earning. And the asset that you own must fulfill certain characteristics. And these characteristics, come in fact from its nature, because when you say you want to earn from an asset, the asset must be able to generate either increments, or at least wealth in the sense of utility value. It must be able to create value. If the asset does not create increment or utility, then that asset is not suitable to be an asset for financing. And by the same token also, there must be actual generation of utility or increment, that is actual generation of added value. If there is no actual generation of added value, of course you cannot make a claim over a value, because where does the increment then come from? You cannot earn with that. Now we add another criteria which is important, that is because of the nature of ownership that is defined in Sharia. Things that are determined as harmful are not defined even as properties to be owned. In other words, when we say you own a property, an asset, that asset must be characterized of being at the least not harmful. If it is harmful, it is not an asset to be owned. And that brings us a little closer to the concept of realism. Let me take an example here. The exhaust of the carbon exhaust of Kyoto Agreement, where quotas are assigned to countries and then to companies. And these companies that cannot or could not or are not planning on using all their quota are selling part of their quota to other companies, and this has become a thing that is subject of trading in the New York market. Now, would that be an acceptable asset to be earned through or to be traded? Definitely the answer that is based on realism and moral commitment both is negative. That is, such a thing, it's by definition, it's harmful. While you are selling how much you will hurt people by throwing in the atmosphere this carbon dioxide or whatever it is called, so the CO2. So the issue here is the object of this is violates the moral commitment and also violate the realism, as a matter of fact. But because what is it? Yani? You are selling not a service that can generate increments or anything or utility. So realism also appears in different areas. Take an example of sale of debt. Sale of debt. What does it do in an economy? It changes the creditor or the debtor of that debt from X to Y, but it does not change the quantity of debt or the quantity of goods and services in the economy. It does not generate either increments or utility in the economy. It transfers wealth from one to the other, but without generating wealth. Debt sale then should not be entitled to any earning because there is no generation of utility or increments in the economy. There is no generation of added value. That brings us again to the same issue of interest itself. Interest as an increment in a debt, whether when we start the debt by giving a loan, or when we extend a debt by changing its maturity. Again, increment does not change, and not increment, I mean the interest really is an addition that is not generated as an added wealth in the economy. There's no added wealth in the economy generated by changing a maturity of a debt. So by the same token, there's no also added wealth created by the mere transfer of ownership of cash from one person to another, and creating by this transfer of ownership a debt of one on the other. So that transaction itself does not create added value. It transfers wealth from one person to another without creating added value. This is definitely unlike sale, where sale transfers items or property or ownership or wealth from one person to another, but that transfer of wealth creates value simply because you wouldn't do that transaction unless what you get is more useful to you than what you give. And that is why sale creates value and exchange create value, whereas transfer of wealth purely through lending does not create value. So these principles have very important implications in the economy. Some of these implications, or the major implications of them, are: one, we are excluding objects that do not produce real wealth from being assets acceptable as basis for earning. That includes debts, and that also includes virtual assets. All virtual assets do not make adequate assets for creating wealth, because they in fact do not create wealth. In reality, they do not create wealth, and accordingly they are not suitable to be bases for earning in finance. And that means options, futures, and all derivatives do not make the proper requirement to be assets that fulfill the condition of realism. It excludes transactions that do not produce real wealth, simply zero-sum transactions, like transferring a debt from one person to another, like gambling, that again transfers wealth only from one person to another, like speculative contract, like also pure cash activities where goods are not intended for themselves. That brings us really to some practice that is done by some Islamic banks, which has no base also in being an asset that can create wealth or add value, what is called tawarruq and ina and so on. These are cash activities in which the goods are not intended for themselves, and the goods are the ones that create the added value. So there's no added value creation when the goods are not intended. Another implication is we apply scientific rule in weighing benefit and harms. That is, when we say things that do not pass the moral standard, the moral test, should not be acceptable as assets for earnings in finance. That means on what criteria we determine what is harm and what is benefit. It is purely scientific, as is evident from the verse in the Quran that tells us about most things or many things, even prohibited things, things that are not really desired in an economy, may have some benefit, yet they have harms and they have benefit. And whenever the harm is more than the benefit, then that item should be excluded. As the Quran said it, وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا, about liquor and about gambling. So here, what is the meaning of إِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا? That is, what is the meaning of the harm being more than the benefit? The verse addresses people at the time of the revelation. It did not address the ulama of the Hanafi school or the Hanbali school or any other school. It addressed people at large, and especially at the time of revelation. Means it addresses human knowledge, not a fiqhi knowledge or an Islamic knowledge in that sense. It is the human knowledge and the human mind that what determines the weights of harm and the weights of benefit. And the example that we have of it is obvious, that cigarettes are harmful, and this is determined by only scientific knowledge, and we accept that scientific knowledge and apply it in finance and in the Islamic finance in specific. So this is the next point, is justice is more important than consent in contracting. When we establish the principle of realism in contracting, that a contract must create, in order for a contract of finance to give a return to the finance producer or provider, that contract must be able to create added value, additional wealth. Sometimes we have consent in contracts that may be under different kinds of duress or pressure or some other factors that disturb really the will of consent. Here where the implication of realism requires that justice comes before consent. Example of it in Islamic lease and conventional lease. In conventional financial lease, if the asset doesn't exist anymore, yet the lessee is still required to pay rent for that asset. Whereas in Islamic financial lease, the rent is defined as the price of the utility, and if there is no utility, there should be no rent. How could there be a rent if there is no utility? So even with consent, we divert that consent to be not fully acceptable because it violates a principle of realism that is manifested as justice in the relationship. Even with the consent, we strike out that consensual part of the contract that says you have to still pay rent even if there is no utility produced. there are many other examples that come in sharing, in partnership, in sharing principle of finance, where we insist that even if there is consent otherwise, the losses can only be distributed in accordance with capital contribution, not in any other way, even with the consent. So justice comes before consent as a result of the application of the principle of realism. Again, we expand the meaning and the scope of finance itself. Finance is no more provision of credit as usually defined. Finance is provision of goods, services, or credit. And that is a more realistic, a more true finance, because giving goods and services and waiting for the counterpart to be paid later, or even without counterpart, that becomes also finance. So that is finance, even whether with a delayed counterpart or without counterpart. In other words, contributory contracts, all of them are also finance contracts, and at the same time, the finance that aims at earning for the finance provider is expanded in its meaning. It can be done through provision of goods or services, as the reality tells us, because it goes without really needing any proof that giving goods that is a finance exactly as giving credit. The next implication is that we integrate finance activity with wealth creating activity. There could be no finance activity once we apply these innovations that are brought in by Islamic finance. There could be no finance activity if there is no wealth creating activity. That is, finance should be through sale, which is wealth creating, through leasing, which is also wealth creating. And when it comes to sharing, you only deserve earning if wealth is actually created as a result of the sharing contract through sale of the goods or services provided by the partnership or by that sharing contract, whatever it is. So here we integrate the whole finance activity in a sense that there cannot be any finance activity that is separated from value creation or wealth creation activity.